Between the 3rd and the 13th centuries, LUSHAN was a sacred mountain for Chinese poets. So important was it that China's entire 5,000-year poetry tradition would be inconceivable without it. The school of principle established itself as the official philosophy, and it would hold sway for over 6 centuries. The school can trace its origins to LUSHAN. Bai Jui was a great admirer of the ancient poet Tao Yuanming. As time passed, he began to consider seeing out his remaining days in seclusion on the mountain, like Tao Yuanming before him. One day he discovered a valley near Donglin Temple. To its north was Yi Temple, and to its south Sensor Peak. It was a place where streams flowed through dense forests. Bai Jui decided this was the spot for him to build a house. "1,200 years after the death of Bai Jui, another man arrived in the forests of LUSHAN. He was Cui Honglun from Henan, Bai Jui's home province. Cui had decided to devote his retirement to finding the place where Bai Jui's house had stood. Having discovered the site, Cui Honglun rebuilt Bai Jui's thatched house just as it was described in some old documents he had found. The thatched house has 4 windows and is divided by pillars into 2 sections. From inside, it's possible to hear the mountain springs and see the mountain peaks. Clouds swell above the house and rocks are under it. Among the tall trees and green bamboo, the hustle and bustle of the earthly world is kept at bay. The owner of the thatched house 1,200 years ago noted down his thoughts to mark the building of the house. In spring I have the flowers in Brocade Valley. In summer, the clouds in Stonegate Ravine. In autumn, the moon over Tiger Stream. And in winter, the snow on Sensor Peak. From these lines, his pleasure is evident. Mount Lu, with its peaks and waters, healed Bai Jui's mental trauma. In gratitude, he wrote about the mountain, "LUSHAN treats me with its beauty. Clearly, heaven has given me this opportunity, and earth this location. Now that I have what I've been seeking, I hanker for nothing more." The writer poured all his praise for the mountain into the opening of the essay on the thatched house on LUSHAN. It reads, "LUSHAN bests every other mountain in the world with its beauty." The air and waters of LUSHAN washed his melancholy away. He became calmer. He had a new outlook on the world, and gradually he abandoned his political ambitions.
每个人他在人生道路上都会有穷达进退。当一个人不顺的时候怎么办？儒家知识分子他有一套安放自己灵魂的一条路径。白居易他作为士大夫呢，所守者道，所待者时，无外乎一个时来不来的问题。他很激动的说：“时之来也，我能够怎么样发挥自己；而时之不来也，我能够守得住。”
In the winter of the year 818, Bai Jui ended his period of punishment in Jiangzhou. He was sent instead to Zhongzhou in Sichuan. Before leaving, he wrote a poem about his thatched house. Mountains and springs, do not feel sorry. I will return in 3 years when my tenure expires. However, he never had the opportunity to return to LUSHAN except for a single night he spent there when he happened to be passing by. We can only assume that the gurgling mountain spring often dreamt of the poet. Between the 3rd and the 13th centuries, LUSHAN was a sacred mountain for Chinese poets. So important was it that China's entire 5,000-year poetry tradition would be inconceivable without it.
一座庐山来过多少文人，文人不经过此地，怎么能够完成他那种生命造境的提升呢？苏东坡也是在庐山上写出了最著名的这种产物。
Su Shi inscribed his immortal lines on a wall in Xilin Temple at the foot of LUSHAN. They read, "Viewed in face, it is a range, and viewed from a side, peaks in a row. The mountain appears now far away, then near, now high, and then low. I cannot make out its true face, for I am its very heart." These lines would become known to every household in China. Xilin Temple has had to be rebuilt many times over the centuries. Su Shi's inscription on the wall long ago disappeared, but it has never been forgotten. Life and the world change, yet people today are just as perplexed by the world around them as their ancestors were centuries ago.
如果你不登临高山，你怎么能知道横看成岭侧成峰？如果你没有远远近近的走过，你怎么知道远近高低各不同呢？所以行走是一种深刻的历练，自然不仅仅是我们的坐标，而且是我们的老师。我见青山多妩媚，料青山见我应如是。那样一种两心相许，人与山岚之间拈花微笑的默契，在今天仍然让我们心向往之。
Between the 3rd and the 13th centuries, LUSHAN was a sacred mountain for Chinese poets. So important was it that China's entire 5,000-year poetry tradition would be inconceivable without it. The school of principle established itself as the official philosophy, and it would hold sway for over 6 centuries. The school can trace its origins to LUSHAN. Su Shi is far from being the only person who has turned to Mount Lu to give them peace of mind at low periods in their lives. 1,000 years ago, the great Song Dynasty writer Ouyang Xiu exclaimed, "LUSHAN, rising thousands of feet high." The Song Dynasty artist and calligrapher Wang Tingjian declared, "Holy Donglin Temple has 18 enlightened men. The breeze on Mount Lu has refreshed since ancient times. When Kang Youwei, the political reformer of the late 19th and early 20th century, came to the mountain, he proclaimed, "Pioneers cut brambles on the 5 Old Men Peaks and planted millions of pines on the mountain." The early 20th century poet Xu Zhimo wrote, "With my eyes brightened momentarily, I suddenly realize the frivolity of nature." As for the great poet and historian Guo Moruo, he said of the mountain, "Lakes and hills shrouded in clouds, the sounds of nature are heard in the mist." Thus, over the centuries, Lushan has accumulated a vast trove of poetry dedicated to it. Lushan Library houses an extensive collection of poems and other works written by Chen Sanli and Chen Yinchue. To the people of Lushan today, these 2 men, father and son, are the children and pride of the mountain. Spirit of independence and freedom of thought is the epitaph Chen Yinchue wrote for the scholar and poet Wang Guowei. It's an inscription, so people believe, that captures the essence of the lasting literary tradition of Lushan.
独立之精神，自由之思想，这是永恒的啊。说他的著作有时可伤他这个，但是为此之独立之精神、自由之思想，历千万世共三光而永光，这是不朽的。
In the summer of 2009, a group of distinguished guests arrived at Lushan. They were descendants of the Chen family from all over the world. They'd come to visit their ancestors' last resting place. The great scholar Chen Yinchue had only paid Lushan a fleeting visit. Yet, it was his wish to be buried on the mountain after his death. His tombstone is an unpolished Ice Age rock found in a mountain valley. The rock symbolizes the unalterable common goal for which the great scholars who visited Mount Lu over the centuries were all striving. It's evening on the 5th day of the 8th lunar month of the 14th year of the reign of the Zhengde Emperor of the Ming Dynasty. The place is Manjushri Tower on Mount Lu. People are celebrating Mid-Autumn Festival despite being chilled by the relentless mountain wind. A servant has brought warm winter clothing, but one man sitting gazing at the night sky is impervious to the cold. He is the famous philosopher Wang Yangmiang. It was later said of him, "The old man sleeps in Manjushri Tower. I strike the night sky with my cane, and the firmament opens." Wang Yangming was an astronomer and philosopher who became a legend of Mount Lu. When people hear his story, they wonder what was he thinking that night as he sat alone in the autumn wind. "500 years have passed, and today people still climb Mount Lu at night to observe the heavens from Manjushri Tower. Many of them hope to gain inspiration from the stars that will help them interpret the old legend." Since ancient times, humans have attempted to communicate with the heavens. In every corner of the world, all manner of rituals have been developed with the purpose of helping us convey to the gods our desire for a better life. Thanks to the development of science, our understanding of the heavens has come a long way. But the scientists who man the weather station on Mount Lu are like modern-day geomancers. Each day, they collect meteorological data with which to provide the residents of the surrounding area and the tourists with vital travel information. The terrain in the LUSHAN area is complicated and the weather conditions are highly variable. So people are accustomed to planning their daily activities based on the weather forecast. Rain and sunshine, cold and heat can be predicted and guarded against. But the world is a changeable place and there is far more than just the unpredictable weather to guard against. Between the 3rd and the 13th centuries, LUSHAN was a sacred mountain for Chinese poets. So important was it that China's entire 5,000-year poetry tradition would be inconceivable without it. The school of principle established itself as the official philosophy, and it would hold sway for over 6 centuries. The school can trace its origins to LUSHAN. A few months before Wang Yangming climbed Mount Lu, it helped to put down an uprising led by Prince Zhu Chenhao against the Ming dynasty. This earned him the title Hero of the Great Ming Army. However, the emperor ultimately felt threatened by Wang Yangming's triumph and his growing influence, and so under intense pressure, Wang Yangming attributed his successes to the incompetent Zhengde emperor. Sitting at the foot of Beauty Peak on Mount Lu, Wang Yangming wrote the Tablet of Merits to celebrate the crushing of the rebellion. Throughout the entire text of the Tablet of Merits, he attributes the military triumphs that should have belonged to him to the bravery and wisdom of the emperor. Two places on and below Mount Lu, the mountain pass at Manjushri Tower and the foot of Beauty Peak, are particularly associated with Wang Yangming's complex and contradictory psychology. Wang Yangming was responsible for countless military triumphs in his lifetime. Yet, after his death, people said of him, "Lying and doing as one pleases will corrupt a man's heart." In the end, death came as a relief for Wang Yangming. However, it also heralded the gradual decline of the Neo-Confucian school of mind he represented, with profound consequences for Chinese philosophy. The decline of the school of mind was a great benefit for its rival of several hundred years, the school of principle. The sphere of Chinese philosophy was transformed from two powerful schools vying for supremacy to one thriving branch. The school of principle established itself as the official philosophy, and it would hold sway for over 6 centuries. The school of principle controlled every aspect of the culture, economy, and society. In fact, still today, it maintains an influence over society that is manifold and complex. The school can trace its origins to LUSHAN. After a rain shower, the lotuses beneath Lotus Peak appear delicate and quite beautiful. To most observers, they're just flowers, but to anyone prepared to reflect on them, they are far more. Tao Yuanming of the Jin loved chrysanthemums. Since the Tang dynasty, people have been fond of peonies. I love only the lotus flower. Though it rises from the mud, it is not stained. Though it is bathed by clear waves, it is not seductive. These lines were written by the Northern Song dynasty philosopher Zhou Duanyi in his An Ode to the Lotus Flower. Zhou Duanyi was very fond of lotus flowers, and he also loved Mount Lu. In a poem, he wrote, "Long have I loved Lushan, and I've bought land among its peaks." He fell instantly in love with the mountain when he set eyes on it for the first time. He had always been an admirer of nature, and the quiet and beautiful setting of Lushan made a deep impression on him, so much so that he planned to resign his government office and spend the rest of his life among its green hills and blue waters. When Zhou Duanyi grew old and retired, he didn't return to his home in Hunan, but settled on Mount Lu near Lotus Peak. Confucian scholars of the time dreamed of studying among quiet mountain forests and giving lectures in famous scenic spots. On Lushan, Zhou Duanyi dug a pool and planted lotus flowers in it. He gave lectures and taught, and he established the Lianxi Academy. Later generations came to know him as Mr. Lianxi or Zhou Lianxi. At Lotus Peak on Mount Lu, Zhou Duanyi completed the seminal works of the School of Principle, Diagram Explaining the Supreme Ultimate, and the All-Embracing Book. He also taught two of the most learned scholars in Chinese history, the brothers Zhang Yi and Zhang Hao. For all this, he became known as the founder of the School of Principle.
理学后来讨论的好多概念，它已经涉及到了。至少说，在逻辑上来说，他已经有了这样一个起点。周敦颐他之所以被称为这个宋明理学的开山之祖，他有他自己的，他在这个理学上有自己的地位，就是因为他这个理论体系呢，他就是对朱熹作为一个代表的一个理学体系，它起到了一个七师后学的一个这样一个作用。
On Chestnut Ridge in the Lushan area, there's a village where most of the residents share the same surname, Zhou. It's here that many of the descendants of Zhou Duanyi live. 500 years ago, at the time of the Hongzhi Emperor of the Ming Dynasty, Zhou Duanyi's family left their home in Hunan and moved to Mount Lu in order to guard his grave. The site is also where Lianxi Academy once stood. Down through the centuries, some of the greatest names in Chinese philosophy, including Huang Tingjian, Su Shi, Cheng Hao, Chang Yi, Zhu Xi, and Wang Yangming, have come to pay their respects at Zhou Duanyi's grave. With time, Lushan, thanks to Zhou Duanyi and Lianxi Academy, became the center for disseminating the School of Principle.
咱们各位尊敬的朋友们咱们现在到的地方是庐山最著名的白鹿洞书院，在中国古代，这里是古代学子们在这里读书学习的场所。
White Deer Hollow Academy stands beside Mount Lu in the shade of towering trees. It's 1,000 years old. Historically, it was one of the 4 major academies in China, the other 3 being Stone Drum Academy in Hangyang, Yuelu Academy in Changsha, and Yingtianfu Academy in Shangqiu. At one time, it was regarded as the country's foremost academy. White Deer Hollow is thought to have been given its name by the great Tang Dynasty poet Li Bai. It's said that he raised a white deer to keep him company while he studied on Mount Lu. During the Southern Tang period in the mid-10th century, the academy was known as LUSHAN National School or the White Deer National School. It was during the Northern Song period that the name was changed to White Deer Hollow Academy. By the time spring came round, White Deer Hollow Academy was ready to reopen. That year, Zhu Xi was 49. His academy gradually became the centre of scholarship for the entire country and remained for many years afterwards the foremost Confucian academy in China. Neo-Confucianism was enthusiastically promoted by the imperial court at the time of the Qing dynasty when Lushan culture enjoyed a golden age.